Hi, I'm Nolan Finley. Welcome to this special web edition of Am I Right? I'm joined by Steve Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. We're going to talk just a few minutes about what's been going on this week. Steve, you've been watching the auto hearings.
Of course, like everybody else in Detroit.
Man, I tell you, it is painful to see these executives getting dragged across the coals like this when no one asked the financial companies who came in and were just handed an immediate check. There was never a doubt that they were going to get their money. No one asked them how they were going to spend it, whether they were going to free up the credit markets, what their survival plan was, and they ended up pretty much doing what they wanted with the money.
Right.
And yet these guys got to come in and basically sell their soul.
Right. Well, they had to come up with these plans that are very detailed and include all kinds of plans and projections down the road, which I don't know if they're solid or not, but they're certainly more than you would get from anyone in any other industry about what their future looks like. They go back and they get the same thing. The hearings on Thursday morning were awful. The Senate was not sympathetic at all. They don't seem to believe the UAW that they've actually taken concessions. They don't seem to believe Chrysler that they'll actually be around. They seem to believe that this is a company for sale looking for cash to make that sale easier. It's just a disaster. And if it doesn't get better soon, I think we're going to be in big trouble.
We are going to be, and the country's going to be in big trouble. Everybody wants to paint this as a Detroit problem, a Michigan problem. If these companies go down, it's going to cost the federal government a lot more than what these loans would cost them. And remember, these are loans.
Right.
These companies are saying, look, this financial crisis is getting in the way of our recovery, our survival. If we could bridge across, if we can get to 2010, a lot of new models, a lot of cost savings kicked in.
Hybrid.
The UAW stepped up and did their part in a big way.
Right, right.
Give us a little help and we can keep this afloat. The chairman of DuPont was speaking at the Econ Club this week and noted that 20% of their business is auto related.
Right.
That's every major corporation in America.
Right. People forget that anybody who makes things in this country makes them for the automakers or makes them for somebody who makes something for the automakers. I mean, tool and die makers, paint companies, Dow Chemical has all kinds of money that's sunk into the auto companies. It is America's business, and if it goes under, it's on average 43,000 jobs per state depend on the auto industry.
A lot of other businesses are going to get sucked under with it.
That's right.
You'll have bankruptcies all down the supply chain, and bankruptcies in industries that nobody really ever thought of as being automotive industry. Congress is playing with fire. I don't know what they're trying to prove in today's hearings. Showboating for the folks back home, maybe, or maybe they really don't believe that these companies are important and can come back, but this hostility toward one of America's great industries, the three of America's oldest and really most important companies, is really hard to watch.
Well, and look how short their memories are. I mean, 1941, Congress comes to Detroit and tells General Motors, stop making cars for the next 4 years. You got to help us win the war. After 9/11, they go to GM and say, help us get the economy restarted. Now we ask for a little help. That's right. We never said no. Now we ask for a little help, and they're giving us the finger. So we could be in some big trouble.
Well, speaking of big trouble, Steve, let's talk about things a little closer to home. Legislature is meeting in lame duck session. What ought they be doing?
Well, they ought to be dealing with the structural problems that we have in this state. I mean, there's huge structural financial problems. We have too much government in Michigan. We have taxes that are, if not too high, that are placed in the wrong, too heavy a burden on the wrong sectors. There are a lot of big issues they need to be dealing with. Instead, they keep looking at things in a year-to-year, how do we patch the deficit kind of mode, and that's not going to work.
Spending their time talking about Cobo Hall as if Cobo Hall even mattered today with everything collapsing around us. The lame duck session is the perfect time to pass some of these difficult choices that this state is going to have to make if it's going to restructure, revive, and survive. They ought to be dealing with, as you said, the business tax. It's too high. We're losing jobs because of it. They ought to be dealing with the benefits of employees. They ought to be dealing with corrections. All of these hard things
Right.
they could deal with in the lame duck session, and then a good chunk of them could go home and, hey, never be held accountable for it. The governor, if she were a leader, would be standing up saying, let's do this, guys. We've got 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and if we wait to January, it's going to be too late.
That's right.
And, it's appalling to think that they're not going to cut the budget now,
Right.
knowing this budget's going to be
Right.
in deficit.
I was real disappointed to see the governor this week say that she was counting on money from Washington to deal with the shortfall next year. And it really exposes the way that she thinks about things. I mean, this is a governor with, I think, a pretty good vision for the future of Michigan. But she doesn't see how to get from here to there and the hard choices that need to be made to make the state more competitive, to get to the green industry that she wants to. And she's not willing to fight for those hard decisions to get made.
And she's not willing to lead. Vision's worth nothing unless you back it up with action. Waiting for a federal bailout, waiting for money from Obama is not structural change.
No.
That's not a long-term economic strategy. And this state still is basing its budget on flat revenue for the year.
Right.
You'd have to be insane to believe revenue's going to be flat. It's going to be low.
Look at how many foreclosures we've had. I mean,
Right.
the tax rolls in every county are shrinking, and there's not enough revenue. That's got to affect the state, just like it's got to affect local governments.
Well, they're also dealing with the Blue Cross reforms.
Right. Right.
I don't know. This is a very complicated package of bills. I don't know why it has to be done now. This is one I wouldn't necessarily do in a lame duck session.
It's a horrible idea to do in the lame duck session. We'll end up with bad law.
Yes.
And the Blues may actually end up with less than what they probably could get from a full session. They spent a whole year in Lansing trying to convince legislators that they needed help. They couldn't get anywhere because it's a complicated issue. You need to take the time to sort out what their needs are versus what the state's needs are to come up with policy that makes some sense. And you can't do that in a couple of weeks.
And these lawmakers have had a lot of money put in their pocket over the last year. They have to make sure they're making a decision that is right for the people of Michigan. Are they going to be doing something that raises the cost of insurance, that drives out insurance companies, eliminates competition, and leaves us all a lot worse off?
Right.
Very real possibility.
Yeah, that's right. And Blue Cross is, I think, very justified in saying that they've got a problem in the independent, the individual group market. Those rates are going nowhere, and the costs are skyrocketing. If they don't get some help, they will be in trouble as the insurer of last resort. But I don't think we can afford to let them stop being the insurer of last resort, which is what I suspect they really want, in order for them to survive.
Well, let's switch topics again, Steve. Christine Beatty this week started the week by entering a plea deal, a guilty plea in the charges against her. Does this end l'affaire Kilpatrick?
I don't think it does. I think it closes this chapter in what has turned out to be one of the sauciest novels I've ever read. I
Can you fictionalize it? Make some money?
Right. If you were writing fiction like this, they would say, "Tone it down some. This is not believable." But here we are with the truth being
Jeffrey
that
Archer
crazy.
would have a field day.
That's right. I think it closes this chapter, but let's remember, Wayne County prosecutor Kim Worthy still has an active investigation going on. There's much more that could come out of that. We all know that there's a federal grand jury in town that's hearing testimony from all sorts of people.
Right.
That will get some of these names. Kwame Kilpatrick, I think Bernard Kilpatrick has something to worry about, and we don't know what role Christine Beatty played in all that stuff.
Or council members.
That's right. So I think this is the end of this first big episode. But boy, next year I think could be an even bigger one.
Well, I'll tell you, Steve, I hope that it comes soon. I would hate for the city to get up and running and rebounding under a new mayor, and then another big bomb hit to destroy confidence in government and to throw the city off track.
Right.
I would hope that whatever, if anything, the feds are doing, the attorney general, the prosecutor are doing, they would get it up during this sort of period of this interim period before we get a permanent new mayor in place, and not drop it later on.
Yeah. I go back and forth about that. I mean, in some ways, I think we need to move on, but I also think there's something to be said to holding people accountable for their behavior, and that doesn't happen often in Detroit. And I think we should all be cheering on both the local prosecutor and the federal prosecutor to say, no more of that. If you're going to break the law around here, you're going to go to jail, and there is not going to be any two ways about it.
And hope the political community learns from it. Well, that's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us for this special web edition of Am I Right? Make sure to watch us when we return to the airwaves, 8:30 Friday nights, beginning again on December 19th. Thanks. I'm Nolan Finley. Thanks to you. We'll see you soon.